all officers including Captain dead. Lying in chart room and on bridge. Probably whole crew dead. I die.
This distress call was heard by vessels passing through the popular shipping route in the Strait of Malacca in May 1947. This ship, the SS Ourang Medan, would go down in history after this spine-tingling call came over the communication channels. For decades after this incident, stories circulated throughout sailors of the crew being found dead following the distress call. There was no apparent reason for the crew being deceased. The dead crew's faces appeared to be frozen in terror and anguish. However, this isn't the first ship to fall to an eerie and mysterious fate. In 1972, the infamous Mary Celeste was discovered at sea with none of the crew aboard. But the difference for the Medan is that no one has any clue what happened to the crew. The origins of the SS Ourang Medan story dates back to the newspaper accounts that happened in 1948. A man named Wynne Brooks provided a detailed and exciting account of the ship's voyage and its strange fate. According to Brooks, the Medan was a 40-year-old cargo steamer ship. Its name translated to Man of Medan in Malaysian. The Medan was passing through the Strait of Malacca with 23 crew members, many whom were of Indonesian descent. The cargo the Medan was carrying on board and its final destination are both unknown, seeing as no accounts have been found to divulge those details. But it's safe to say the Medan never made it. In the story given to Brooks, an Italian officer of a ship received an SOS on his radio. Ships with shortwave get urgent DH Medico. This was also followed by a similar yet different message from one reported in the accounts. We are floating. Second officer dead on bridge. Captain and chief engineer dead in chart room. Probably whole crew dead. Partly. In this message, the man was said to have delivered unintelligible Morse code before continuing to say, "I am dying," and then complete radio silence. After the distress signal, ships headed in the direction of the boat, which took them several hours and drifted into the following day. Once they spotted the Medan, it was not moving, with no steam billowing from the smokestacks. The Medan was dead in the water. Using a loudspeaker of sorts, a man from the rescue crew tried getting the attention of any survivors aboard the Medan. He was met with silence. The rescuers climbed aboard to find the corpses of the crew, along with a dead dog among them. They found the radio operator, who presumably sent out the distress call, dead next to the ship's radio. None of the bodies seemed to have been subjected to any kind of violence, yet the dead crew didn't seem as if they had passed on peacefully either. Their postures were odd, almost convulsed, and their faces twisted, as if frightened to death. There was limited time to investigate and examine the bodies, as not long after they boarded, they were called back to their own ship, seeing as one of the Medan's smokestacks began to catch fire. Once back on the ship, the crew witnessed the Medan suffer 4 explosions across the ship. Engulfed in flames, it quickly sank into the water, taking all of its secrets with it. It's ridiculously hard for ships to vanish completely, seeing as nautical travel involves records of departures, stops, and arrivals. The weird detail about this strange story is that the Medan didn't register with Lloyd's Shipping, which kept records of all its ships. However, it is possible the history of the cargo ship may have prevented an accurate trail of its whereabouts. Medan refers to a Sumatran island where the ship could have been registered. Some believe the Medan was a Dutch ship that was commandeered by Indonesian pirates, which then ferried illicit cargo and would have reason to avoid being documented at all costs. Something to be wary about is how the story of the Medan spread. According to Brooks, The tale came from Indonesia before arriving in Elsevier's Weekly, Holland's most popular periodical, in January 1948. That account was supposedly taken from an unnamed Italian officer who was a part of the crew who responded to the distress call. The editor of the story said he bought the man's story as well as a photograph of one of the bodies found on the Medan. The editor then revealed that the officer disappeared and was unreachable soon after. This circulated in both England and the United States, with each story muddling the radio operator's words slightly. Oddly enough, Brooks and the Elsevier's Weekly were fairly late to the news. The earliest British reports of the Medan's fate date back to 1940. In these records, the distress call was similar, but the Medan's radio operator abandoned the request for medical aid and demanded a warship come and help them. A British merchant ship responded to the call and headed towards the Medan. They found around 12 corpses. It's possible there were more bodies aboard, but the explosions on the Medan caused the men to abandon the ship. In this account, the bodies aboard the Medan didn't have strange, twisted faces. The Medan was reportedly found with one lifeboat missing, leading some to believe at least one of the ship's crew attempted to escape and could have possibly made it to land. Throughout this entire story, author Michael East points out that one name comes up repeatedly: Silvio Shirley. It was Shirley who told Dutch news outlets about the Medan in 1940, and may have been the source of accounts that same year. Perhaps Shirley spoke with Indonesia or Dutch newspapers again in 1948. Was Shirley also the man Elsevier's Weekly spoke with in 1948? And the man who claimed to be an Italian officer aboard the rescue boat? One very interesting theory surrounding the Medan is that it was being used to haul an extremely dangerous cargo. Some say the Japanese may have used the ship to smuggle experimental biological weapons, known as Unit 731. According to some, the Japanese sought to create the most dangerous chemical weapon for their establishment of Japanese supremacy. Shiro Ishii, a Japanese bacteriologist, conducted several heinous experiments throughout the Second World War. He was the one who created Unit 731 in 1932. Is it possible the Japanese smuggled Unit 731 onto the Medan, along with its foreign crew who has to stay off the grid? Whether these accounts are accurate or not, it does tell a fascinating story. Let me know what you think. Did the crew of the Medan face an unimaginable fate out on the sea? Did the Japanese smuggle a horrible biological weapon aboard the Medan? Was this a story created by a man looking for some quick cash? I'll see you on the other side.